This meeting is being recorded.
So good afternoon, welcome. It's 5:30 and I'm calling the November 1st, 2022 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board to order. May we please have the roll call?
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. Member Miller?
Here.
Member Hanson?
Here.
Member Rosenau?
Here.
Vice Chair Nelson is excused tonight. Chair Huff?
Present.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. May we please have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Yes, the agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of the council chamber and at the Planning Department counter in accordance with policies and procedures.
Very good, thank you. Does the board have any revisions to the agenda? Any revisions? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay. So I have a motion by Scott Miller and a second by Janet Hanson. Is there any discussion regarding the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? So motion passes 4-0. So next is time that has been set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items and items of general interest within subject matter of the jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on any items not listed on the posted agenda. There will be 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings are taken at the time of that hearing. So staff, has anyone requested to comment on a non-public hearing item?
No, Madam Chair, there's nobody that's contacted me, and I don't think we have anybody in the waiting room, correct, Chris?
That's correct, Madam Chair. There's no one in the waiting room and no one has asked to speak.
Okay, seeing no speakers, we will proceed with our meeting. Staff, would you please introduce the preservation officers who are present today?
Yes, and it gives me pleasure to announce that the city has a new historic preservation officer, and she is Sarah Yoon. She's here joining us today. Welcome, Sarah. If you would like to unmute and give us a little bit of background about yourself, and welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, Ken. I am excited to be here. Hello, board. My name is Sarah Yoon. I am just a brief introduction about myself. I'm a Colorado native, was working in Colorado in the city of Aspen for the past 5 years as their historic preservation planner. I just moved into the area, so I'm just getting familiar with Palm Springs, and apparently I came at the best time. The weather has been lovely where it is snowing in Aspen. And a little bit about my background. I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Colorado Boulder for environmental design with an emphasis in architecture. I did go to Korea University for my master's in architecture, and then I proceeded to get another master's degree in New York for historic preservation. And so I have a deep passion for architecture and for preservation. I have an interest, I would say, in mid-century modern architecture. That is actually what I wrote my thesis on when I was in New York. And so it is a very exciting topic for me. And of course, there's no other place that has the most amazing inventory of mid-century modern architecture than Palm Springs. And so I'm excited to be here. Ken is downloading a lot of information about the town, and I'm sure it will take me a little bit to catch up, but I appreciate everyone's warm welcome, and I look forward to working with the board.
Very good, and thank you, and welcome to you. We look forward to to meeting you in person and speaking with you. You have an amazing education, very well-rounded and varied, which is good. And I'm a native Coloradan, so we have that in common to begin with. So we'll talk Coloradan someday.
Sounds good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Is there any other board members that would like to ask any questions or comments at this time, or we can move on to, oh yes, Member Hanson.
I don't have any questions for you, Sarah. I just wanted to give you a hearty welcome also on my behalf. It really is going to be great to have you here. And as everyone has said, Ken is, I'm sure he's beside himself. Even though, you know, can be training a new person also is, you know, can take a bit of time, but it definitely sounds like you're pretty well fitted for this position. So glad you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for the welcome.
Very good. So we have another special preservationist here with us. So Ken, would you like to make that introduction?
Yes, with pleasure. I want to introduce to the board Patty Garcia. Patty is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. And Patty and I have a fairly long, but somewhat, you know, hand's length relationship in working in preservation here in the city. Patty's going to tell you a little bit more about how the THPO's role differs from that which Sarah is soon to step into and that I am handing off the baton on. One thing that I will just do as a quick intro for Patty, and Patty, I'll let you kind of give them your background as well, but as you know, the city's historic preservation ordinance was updated comprehensively in 2019 and again in 2020. And at that time, we formalized in the ordinance the relationship and the separation of responsibilities and duties between the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and the city's Historic Preservation Officer. So typically what that's meant, what that has meant in the last couple of years is primarily when applications come into the city, I forward them usually in bunches to Patty. But when there are applications that are on the reservation that are allotted land or tribal trust land, those are handled exclusively by Patty and her staff. And we also keep communications going in terms of some of the C of A's and other activities that the board does. But I wanted to bring Patty on today because we have such an enormously heavy workload today in our agenda. I thought it was a great opportunity to both introduce all of you to Patty, but also to introduce Patty and Sarah together. So Patty, please take it away.
Good evening, everyone. I have a short presentation. If I could share my screen with you, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, can you see the slide? Okay,
Okay.
so my name is Patty Garcia. I'm the Director of Historic Preservation for the Agua Caliente Band of Cahuilla Indians, and I've been here for 16 years. I am not a member, I am staff, and I've played 2 different roles in this department. The first 2 years that I worked here, I was brought on as the archaeologist, and then I became the interim director, and then for about 6 months, and then the director since then. So I've been in the role as the HPO for a little bit of time now, and been working with Ken at the City of Palm Springs, and then with other representatives from local municipalities, state and federal agencies. And I want to welcome you to the Agua Caliente Indian Reservation. I'm here representing the tribal members. I'm also here representing the ancestors and all the resources that are on the lands, the traditional homelands of the Cahuilla, which encompasses over 4 million acres. And in this slide, there's some historic photos of different tribal members and gatherings. And then also there's a collection of photos from our current tribal council. The Agua Caliente Indian Reservation is about 31,500 acres, and there are different overlapping jurisdictions that makes historic preservation and other business within the reservation quite complicated. But this map here shows you the traditional use area. Those are the traditional homelands of all the Cahuilla, and there are 9 Cahuilla tribes. It's depicted here in the brick color on the map. So you'll see that there's a variety of different reservations and other landscape features within the area. On the left is a map that shows overlapping jurisdiction with the city of Palm Springs, Cathedral City, and Rancho Mirage. The reservation is depicted in green, and the reason that the reservations here in the Coachella Valley are checkerboarded is because of the installation of the railroad in the 1800s. The United States government had allocated every other section along the railroad route for development of the railroad. And then on the right is a map of the tribe's reservation with the different land status. There's tribal trust land that's depicted in the brighter blue. There's land that's owned by the tribe that's not yet in trust in the lighter blue. There's allotted lands, and then there's allotted and leased lands. Allotted are pink, allotted and leased are yellow. And then some lands that were allotted have been transferred out of trust and are fee lands, and those are depicted in green. However, all lands are subject to jurisdiction of the TIPO for historic preservation purposes. Our office has developed a series of documents to assist us in our historic preservation process. We have a formal research design and historic preservation management plan that are written from the theoretical orientation of Indigenous archaeology. And that places historic preservation and the framework of how we approach historic preservation from an Indigenous worldview, which is different than a Western worldview. We take all of the tribal members into consideration when we're approaching the work that we do. And we've worked with membership and tribal council to develop our management plan and our research design, and also our TIPO ordinance. One of the main projects that we've done in recent years is the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum and the Spa at Seque. It's located on the corner of Indian and Taquish, where the former Palm Springs Spa was located. This is a rendition of the buildings. They're standing now, but they're not quite completed yet, and they're slated to be open, I think, in spring of next year. During construction grading, our cultural resource monitors were observing construction grading activities, and our monitors found deeply buried, untapped cultural deposit, which indicated that it had not been disturbed during the previous construction of the 1950s spa and hotel that was there in former years. You'll see one of our cultural monitors, Roman Dominguez, there walking along the cut line. He discovered one of the first buried deposits. This is 12 feet below modern road surface. So they had cut down 12 feet below. And then in the top picture on the right, you'll see that there are 2 locusts, locust 1 and 2, and those were both got down to about 12 feet when they both noticed that there were cultural deposit in those areas. We ended up doing testing and working with tribal membership. You'll see our former tribal chairman, Jeff Groovy, with his family, looking at the different testing areas that we were investigating. We ended up doing a large-scale, massive excavation that took over 4 months. We had to halt the construction process for that long time, and you know that means a lot of money for a developer. And in this case, our client was the tribe, and so we had a lot of work and convincing to do. But the tribe is very enthusiastic about their culture and working with our office on historic preservation matters. So you'll see we did investigation of 2 different areas. We used a variety of different information that's available to us. Some of it was historic imagery, and you'll see on the map on the left that there's 2 areas, one's in red and one's in yellow, that showed some historic structures that had been recorded by either historians or archaeologists in the recent past that were in the CHRIS system, the California Historic Information System, and also in our database. And then obviously the original hot springs that Agua Caliente is named after, and as well as the city of Palm Springs, which is circled in blue. I believe that historic area was from about 1930s, early 40s. On the right is a picture, I think, from about 2013 that shows those same areas of cultural interest that we knew about, resources that we were aware of, although we did know that that area was occupied for a millennium or more. We identified areas of investigation that were going to be impacted by the new museum and the new spa, and we decided to do a full-scale excavation with approval by Tribal Council. And you'll see that there's MSUs, they're units that were defined, 4x4 meter units, and they were excavated by machine and then screened through this screening machine that is used for siphoning out larger boulders from smaller boulders, but we fitted it with a very small screen that you would typically do by hand for an archaeologist. So instead of doing everything by hand, which probably would have taken 2 years or more, we were able to complete everything in 4 months with these large screening machines and a large excavator. So here's some of the machinery that we used. There was a great awl that was used. It's I believe the XL 5200. And then you'll see that the archaeologists that we hired, along with our staff and tribal members that were working in the field, hand excavating features that were identified during the large scale excavation. This is the washing station where after the material was screened, we hand washed everything with large water hoses and an area that was away from the construction but within the project boundaries. And we have a variety of archaeologists and tribal members and staff that worked on this effort to recover as many artifacts as possible. We recovered over 3,000 artifacts from the site, and they varied from groundstone metates, like these large metate slabs that were used for processing indigenous foods such as mesquite, screw bean, or acorn. We also found through protein residue analysis that the Cahuilla people at this site were also processing meats with these types of implements. Here are some hand stones, or referred to as manos. And so you would use this mano in your hand, they're about the size of your hand, and you would place the food on the metate and grind and process your food and create your dinner or your breakfast. And then in this slide here, we'll show you some of the beads that were found. We were able to find very fragile objects during the excavation, even though we were using these large machines, and everything was washed in the washing screens and handled with rocks. And you'd be surprised what you can recover with this type of excavation. There's also large bifaces that were made out of chalcedony and cherts, quartz. We have some shell objects. I believe that those are pendants. And then there's a very large abalone pendant on the far left. Like I said, we did some of the analysis in the lab with statistical research. That was the consulting archaeologist. And here are our tribal members from our Historic Preservation Board during that year that conducted the protein residue analysis with the board and with TIPO staff, along with the archaeologists, creating a very dynamic work environment and allowed to hand over sovereignty and ownership of the actual work that was done to our members and to Tribal Council. And John here on the upper left photograph, he's currently serving on Tribal Council, John Preckwinkle. And then next to him is Anthony Purnell. He's a former Tribal Council member, along with Ms. Teal and Savannah Sobel. That's Kelly Teal, Jeff Groupie's, our former chairman's sister. These are all very prominent members of the community, and there are, well, they were our youth, now they're adults, so they're taking over the pride of the tribe's culture and really taking over, you know, the work that needs to be done. Another picture of our collaborative efforts, kind of talking over the work that we did and thoughts that we had while we were doing that, which is an important part of the reciprocal relationship that we have with members, with the staff, and with our consulting archaeologists. And that's just a little brief overview of some of the work that we do in our office. Obviously, we review projects under certain historic preservation law in order to review potential impacts to historic properties or cultural resources, both on and off the reservation. And we're happy to be preservation partners and build relationships with all of the different historic preservation officers and boards, all the different stakeholders and key players in the process. And we're just looking forward to building a good relationship with the new board and with the new historic preservation officer and move forward with our work together in a collaborative effort.
Wonderful. It was welcome, and it was delightful to hear about your projects, and it's exciting. The Cultural Center, we're all in the community are so excited for that to open next year. And thank you for sharing all that material. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Garcia? Member Hanson?
Hi, I just wanted to say hi to Patty. We go back about, I was just thinking about it, Patty, 17 years.
I know, we used to work together for.
And we don't see each other that often, but anyway, it's very nice to see you again. We've seen each other a couple of times in Palm Springs as well for the state commission meeting a while ago. I just was curious to know, what was the age of the artifacts that were found? I know there must be a range of years, but.
Yeah, the radiocarbon dating is about 8,600 years ago. So it's the oldest site in the Coachella Valley now. There's one other site, well, there's like 2 or 3 other sites in Southern California are about that old. One is located in Lake Elsinore, and then there's a few on the coast in Orange County, and I believe 1 or 2 in San Diego. And so this is really changing the time scale for occupation of the Cahuilla in this area. There's been a variety of different viewpoints on time and the longevity of tribes, and some different theorizing on when different tribes occupied different areas. But as far as the Cahuilla and the Agua Caliente are concerned, they've been here since time immemorial. And I believe that this information, this site really bolsters and supports the traditional belief that they have that exists in their oral histories. And we're really proud of the work that we did, and we're really excited to learn more about the site. There's a lot of work that can be done there. And yeah, we're just really excited. We're working on a book that's going to be published at the end of the year, and it'll be available for purchase at the museum.
And you said the museum or the cultural center, probably the spring, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing that it's going to open in the spring.
Okay, that's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Forward to that. Any other comments? Mr. Lyon.
2 questions. Patty, is the original ceremonial roundhouse that was burned in the late 40s when Chief Potencio passed, was that in section 14 or was that elsewhere in the reservation?
It is in section 14. I can't tell you exactly where it is, but the tribe now owns the property. It was in a different ownership. It's currently in tribal ownership, and it's being preserved into perpetuity.
And can you talk just a minute about the small cemetery that's on Tahquitz Canyon Way in terms of its context within sort of the timeline of occupancy and how it was actually used, or is it ancient or newer?
Right. So there are a few different known cemeteries within the Palm Springs area. Traditionally, the Cahuilla cremated their deceased, and then there were a variety of different ceremonies that were performed. And so there was actually a funeral pyre fight, like a large fire where the remains were burned, and then they would be reburied or buried somewhere nearby or in another location. And there's also death rite ceremonies, and then there's ceremonies that occur after 1 year of death. And some of those ceremonies are continued into current times. Each family participates or conducts ceremonies as they see fit. So, you know, some people think that traditional culture is no longer, but that's not true. It continues to this day. And so the cemetery that you're speaking of is a historic cemetery that one of the Indian agents would not allow tribal members to bury their family members or their loved one. And that's why the new cemetery that was created on Tockwitz, it's really not that new, but we call it the new one, is used now into current times. And so because of that, that decision made by the Indian agent who purchased the land at a very low price, decided that they didn't want to allow anyone to bury their members there anymore because they wanted to use the land for another purpose. And I think that was a farm of some sort. We actually, the tribe does own that property again. There was a land agreement, I think, between the city and the tribe a while back. And the land was either purchased or transferred to the tribe. And it's being preserved, and it's in an undisclosed location, but it is in the city of Palm Springs. So yeah, the tribe really wants to protect their culture, history, and their ancestral remains.
And can you speak just a moment about the contemporary activity that you do? For example, those applications that come in for historic designation. I think the most recent one that your office processed was the Alexander on Caliente.
Right. So under our agreement with the National Park Service for the Historic Preservation Office designation, which the tribe received in 2005, each tribe who has federal recognition can apply for that designation through the National Park Service. And during that, they decide which responsibilities they want to take over from the State Historic Preservation Officer. And that's all indicated in the application and the agreement document between the tribe and the National Park Service. So one of the responsibilities typically taken, and one that Agua Caliente assumed, was the designation or the review for the National Register properties on the reservation. There are two historic or prehistoric sites on the reservation that are on the National Register, and that's Tockwitz National Register District. It's an archaeological district, and it's open to the public. You can go and visit it. There's a waterfall, there's a trail. You could take a guided tour on the trail, and you can learn a lot about the tribe's prehistory and history there. And then the second is the Andreas Canyon National Register District in Indian Canyons, and you can take a tour there as well. And there's several canyons that you can go. Andreas is the longest continually occupied Cahuilla village into historic time, when the men had to relocate to San Bernardino County to get work, and some of them went off to war. And then they moved back later on after that period of time. We do review any applications to the National Register. So if somebody wants to or plans to nominate a property, if it's on the reservation, regardless of land status, we do the review, not the city. So even if it's fee land and it's on the reservation, the application would come to our office. If somebody isn't aware that their property is on the reservation, which is fairly common, they may submit their application to Ken or the city, but then he'll forward it on to us, and we'll have a chat with the landowner. But we review the applications the same way as the city or a SHPO would. We have a consulting architectural historian that we have contracted. And if we have any concerns or issues or properties that we're not familiar with, we'll work with them to make sure that the properties are reviewed properly and that we understand what the context is, and also if the properties actually meet the criteria. Sometimes it's really obvious right away if something doesn't meet criteria, but like I said, I'm not an architectural historian, and so I have to work with a consultant to assist me with that. But I've learned a lot through the way, and I have a great appreciation for mid-century modern and all types of architecture. It's just our main focus is Kuya culture.
And I think one of the most recent National Register items that you did was the airport.
It was one of them. And what's interesting is that a lot of people don't understand that the airport is on the reservation.
Right.
And so it's kind of a surprise when people find out. I always thought that the airport should be called the Agua Caliente Airport, International Airport. I thought that was a really good idea.
And now that they're going through all this rebranding, you should bring that matter up.
Right? I think that might be a good idea. It's a great airport. The architecture is beautiful. And when you get off your airplane and you walk out the front door and you see how beautiful the landscaping is, and then you see the beautiful mountains there, there's no other airport like it. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Well, Patty, I want to personally say thank you. You know, as I transition this role over to Sarah, you know, our relationship has been usually kind of distant at times because we're both squirreled away in our own piles of work. But I have always appreciated the relationship with you, and I'm sure that moving forward with Sarah, you guys can enrich that relationship further, as well as I think this is a great opportunity for our Historic Site Preservation Board to get a little snippet, just a little quick glimpse at how the two offices actually do many things differently, but also where we do have crossover and interrelationships because of the land use agreements between the tribe and the city. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come tonight. And I think it really helps enrich this relationship as we go forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, board. And Sarah, I'm looking forward to working with you.
I also am looking forward to working with you. Thank you, Patty.
Oh, and just a quick notice for you, Sarah. Patty's offices are over at the tribal headquarters building on Dinah Shore. So we'll point that out to you as things go forward.
Wonderful.
Bye,
Super.
everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty. Well, it's delightful to have time at these meetings to learn, you know, what's happening in our community from other members, such as the tribe. And so that was really delightful. I really enjoyed that. So thank you, Ken, for arranging that.
You're welcome. And I have a few other tricks up my sleeve that I'm going to work with Sarah on. They're all big secrets right now. But I'm gonna work with Sarah, and we're gonna bring some other guest speakers into the board meetings from time to time, so that we further educate and enrich the board's understanding and awareness of historic things in Palm Springs.
Yeah, excellent. That's really great. Thank you very much. So now we shall proceed to the consent agenda. So has everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes that were sent to us? Are there any revision to the minutes of the meeting of October 11th? Member Scott Miller?
Yes, on the first page, under acceptance of the agenda, where it says Member Miller recused himself from the study session, I would request that it also say comma and left the meeting, just to be clear that I was not a part of the meeting. I want to sort of make that really defined.
Perfectly
And
fine.
then also on page 2 of the minutes, this is on a section that I wasn't a part of, but it's just purely a typo. In the very middle of the page, the paragraph starting with Member Rosenau, there's a typo in the 4th line down. Rosenau asked if the applicant intends to pursue, so that the word TO should be removed. And then on that same one, the same item at the bottom of the page, I think, and this is maybe a question for Ken or Christopher, it notes me as abstaining on the vote, but I think it probably would be more properly stated that I recused on the vote because I wasn't there. So I don't know if abstain is the right word.
I can clarify that.
Yeah, I
that's-
do believe for the
that's it.
purposes of our agenda, that recusing is an abstention, but we can confirm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all my comments on that.
Okay, and Member Hanson, did you have some?
Yeah, just one really nitpicky typo on page 3. In the middle of the page where public comment, bas relief is spelled wrong.
Mhm,
BAU should be BAS. That's it for me.
mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes with those corrections?
So
Motion,
moved.
okay. So, so have a motion, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so, is there any discussion, about the minutes? So all in favor, please say aye.
I,
Okay, any opposed? Okay, so, all those in favor, we said aye, so, motion passes 4-0. Okay. So. So today, we do not have any public hearings or any unfinished business or new business. So let us proceed to agenda discussion item 5A with a report from Member Hanson on the subcommittee for the 2023 Preservation Matters Symposium. Member Hanson.
yes, thank you. I actually don't have much new to report from the last meeting. We're all just, working away at firming up the speakers. I guess I can repeat, although I'm not sure there's an audience tonight, but that the symposium will be held on the 29th and 30th of April at the Convention Center. It'll be in the afternoon on both of those days. And the topic is Mirage Becomes an Oasis, Water and Tourism History in Greater Palm Springs. So we have a great lineup of, I think, about 12 to 14 presentations at this point on the topics of water and tourism, sometimes interpreted broadly, but always creatively. So I think it's going to be a great 2-day session, and we're just working away on, getting the speakers line up and then the background work going on in terms of lining up the convention center. And I don't know if Catherine, did you have anything else, Chair Huff, to?
Just that it's, over the 2 days, as you mentioned, and is it from like basically 1 to 5 p.m.?
Yes, and then on the first day, the 29th, there'll be tours immediately after the meeting ending at 5.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe one other thing I didn't mention last time, we are going to pursue some sponsorships this year, which is a new thing. And so I just, Ken was going to confirm a few things, Mr. Lyon, with regard to, just the mechanics, since it's a city event, of how these donations or sponsorships would go. And I would assume maybe over the next year or so, and even for the year after, we'll probably get a process going, and a system in place for doing that will work moving forward. But we'll see what we can do this first year.
Yeah. And just briefly to elaborate on that, the way we're going to handle it this year is because the city has special relationships with the convention center on pricing and things like that. The sponsorships will be written to the city, and then the city will pay the bills directly to the convention center.
Mm-hmm. So keep track of the expenses accurately. That's very good.
Yeah, and I think in the terms of the sponsors, they would want to, have a clear understanding where not just where the money's going to. They may select what they're going to sponsor, but to make sure that these are charitable contributions.
And I think that I don't know if I reached out back to you on that, but when I did speak with the city attorney and finance, we do believe it does become a charitable.
Yeah, I thought that as well, but just wanted to confirm because I have a couple people that are very interested in pursuing, but they just wanted a couple questions answered first.
Very good. Well, we look forward to that. So anything else about the symposium that's coming up? We'll be making reports every month, so we can continue the conversation. So next, are there comments from the board? Anyone would like to make a comment at this time from the board?
I mean, maybe just a question for Ken that you might have, maybe you're going to address. I was just wondering the status of in-person meetings again, or if there's any news on that.
I haven't heard when we may be able to go back to in-person meetings. I don't know, Chris, have you heard anything? on that?
Ken, I might jump in because we had news just this morning. So the city council did discuss this at their meeting last week. And I believe that we are in the process of just establishing some policies and procedures to allow boards and commissions to restart in-person meetings should they choose to. So there are just a few logistical issues to discuss surrounding that. So if the board were to want to do that again, then the question is, do we want to go back to fully in-person meetings or do hybrid meetings to allow some people to participate remotely? Because that sort of dictates the technology that goes behind the meeting. So I think in the next week or so, we'll have a little bit of clarity on that. But I would say that probably I'm not sure that we'll get quite organized for the December meeting, but we could look at restarting in-person meetings at the January meeting if the board so wished to do so. And so perhaps that could be a discussion item at the December meeting so that we can put the wheels in motion to make that happen for January if you wish to do so. It's not going to be mandatory, so it is at this point at the discretion of each board and commission.
Yeah, I think that would be great to have that as a discussion item.
Good.
With all the board members.
Sure. Thank you. So are there any other comments from the board before we go on to inviting staff to give us any more comments or tidbit of information? Anything else, Mr. Lyon?
Yes. In general, part of what I want to work with Sarah on is possibly doing some community, for lack of a better word, training, in which, as you know, I've developed a lot of what I call technical assistance bulletins and guides for all kinds of things, from Mills Act contracts to how to do research to design guidelines for historic districts. But what we seem to have a lot of are some misunderstandings in the historic resources reports that we get in terms of the differentiation between the Palm Springs criteria and the national criteria. And so I haven't had a chance to talk with Sarah or Chris about this, but I think it would help the process and reduce some of the red marking that I have to do on preliminary reports so that we can get these reports to align more closely with our criteria so that when we do the analysis at the staff level and the board reviews these applications, they're able to better relate them to our own ordinance. So that's something I kind of have as a to-do list in the back of the rest of my to-do lists. Other than that, I don't know if you have heard, but the House of Tomorrow has apparently sold. So that's big, big news. I know that was one of the things that Director Hadwin had gone on while he was here during Modernism Week. So that's pretty exciting.
I can confirm that it was not me that purchased it, but it was a wonderful tour in any event.
So that's all I have. I'm looking forward to passing the torch, and I think Sarah is going to be a great. You always hire somebody who can do the job better than you, and so I think that's what we found here.
Good, thank you. And so, Sarah, do you have any comments, or we'll just hear from you every month?
I think you'll start hearing from me more often, but today I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm excited to be working with you all.
Well, we welcome you. So delighted. So are there any other discussions? Okay, seeing no further discussions, this Historic Site Preservation Board meeting is adjourned to the regular meeting of Tuesday, December 6th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. So we thank all of you for participating at this meeting, and thanks Mr. Lyon for arranging our guests, Patty Garcia, to join us and to meet Sarah. So we look forward to the next meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.